Vaughan, just quickly, what are we expecting today and why is it so important to talk about BIM as we get into it?
Yeah, good evening, Anil. Good evening to all our listeners. I think this has always been a fantastic opportunity. And for the first time, we're doing this webinar live from Mauritius, for a change, not from South Africa, Cape Town. And I think the CPD series that you have done has truly been an inspiration for many. And I have no doubt that your passion as well as your grit have certainly paid off. I think I recently saw you in the UK Building magazine. So well done for all your hard effort. So yeah, I think, you know, this is a fantastic opportunity to really dive into a different type of topic. And there's a reason I'm calling it the leadership from dusk till dawn. And I think if there's any passionate BIM enthusiasts out there, call them evangelists if you want. You know, if Pierre Fenter from the UK is listening, who's also a passionate BIM evangelist, if you really want to be successful as a BIM leader, you have to live it. You have to live it. You have to understand that this is not just a job. It's a living, and it's a lifestyle. It's not just understanding, let's say, how we do Revit or how we get involved with software such as Navisworks or becoming involved with common data environments with information management. This is not just about understanding information management. And the message we're going to have put across today is it's not just about getting that CPD certificate. It's about understanding an industry, an entire construction process, and learning where you can improve not only digitally, but empower yourself along the way to become more enthusiastic and share your skills with those who are just sort of entering this new field or putting their toes into this new environment. So that's really what today's webinar is about.
Okay, thank you, Vaughan. Just quickly, Dylan, the founder and managing director of Remerge, nice to see you. And of course, thank you to be part of this amazing BIM webinar. So you and Vaughan are actually, you know, working together to accelerate BIM in the construction industry. So a few words from yourself as to why this BIM knowledge today is important.
Well, I think what's very important is that we've brought BIM into Mauritius via Vaughan. Remerge has recently procured a portion of exceptional BIM with its vision to bring in and filter through the industry with a different strategy, a strategy that merges my background and Vaughan's background and make us stand out. I think we're a little behind in BIM, and I think our Vaughan's understanding, particularly, can greatly assist Mauritius to be a leader in this field.
Awesome. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Vaughan. I'm just going to do a quick introduction before we get into it. Everybody, thank you for joining us. Really, really appreciate massive turnout. So thank you very much indeed. And we've got colleagues watching us a lot from obviously 75% from Mauritius, but many as well around the world. So thank you very much indeed. I'm just going to share the screen quickly as we kickstart the webinar. So okay, so good evening, everyone, and thank you very much indeed for this amazing BIM Leadership Dusk Till Dawn by Vaughan Harris, the Baron of BIM, and also we've got Dylan Bobstein from Bodenstein, from the Managing Director and founder of Remerge project management firm. Just quickly in terms of our agenda, so we'll have a quick housekeeping. We're just going to start now. We'll have a quick survey as we do to make sure it's as interactive and as much information we can get out of you. Part 2, Q&A, and then conclude. So just quickly, many of you know who I am, so I'm just going to pause quickly on that one. Love learning, love sharing, passionate about giving back. Almost 20 years now in 3 months' time, 20 years in the construction industry. So I'm lucky, humble, privileged, and honored to be with you today, alongside also the speaker and the panelists today. 263 registered, didn't manage to update that, so thank you again. And also you'll get a certificate attendance. Please email me anil@cbdtalk.com. Please bear with me on my email. I'm having issues. I'm getting your email, but I can't send email. So please email me your feedback on this email, as well as I will get you a certificate attendance for 1 hour plus today. And of course, gargantuan thank you to Vaughan for giving back his time as well as to look into improving our industry. I just wanted to share this. I mean, you will probably familiar with Jay Shetty there, but there's so many people there like Gary and the rest. But I'm just for I put Vaughan in there. He looked like, of course, Greg Daniel, the Bond 007 he mentioned. But these are speakers, podcasters, and social media influencers casting a white shadow, helping to shape and improve millions of lives between them. They have different areas of specialty, diverse background, and varied interests. But in their own way, each carries the torch of hope, positive movement, women empowerment, and coaching in their respective industry and values. And I could not see any more difference in that one, where Vaughan is trying to really get our industry to the next level. And I'm really, really excited to have Vaughan and Dylan today with us. So quickly on the presenter, Vaughan Harris, certified quantity surveyor. I know many QS and architects are watching us today as well as engineers. Has a wealth of 30 years of experience working in the leadership business development arena within the built environment. His shamelessly strong opinion and in-depth expertise in digital transformation has successfully led him to develop various trained BIM program under the BIM Academy. Through his passion and determination, Vaughan is the founder and engine room behind the BIM Institute for South Africa, while promoting education through exceptional BIM in the development and awareness of both digital strategies and implementation of BIM guideline for the African built environment, and consult various African companies on practical BIM protocol industry technology standard and guideline in line with the new ISO 19650 standard. Last but not least, Vaughan's latest book that he authored, BIM, It's Your Move. Obviously, we'll talk about that book as well. Has distributed more than 5,000 copies across the globe and is aimed at professionals serious about the digital construction future and are working in earnest to future-proof their careers and companies. Finally, it is a valuable source of an honest synopsis of where the continent stands in its own digitalization journey. So please join me in welcoming Vaughan. If you can put your hands up, please, for Vaughan. Honored and privileged to have him. And finally, we've got the panelist and the presenter as well, Dylan Bodenstein, Managing Director of Remerge. Dylan has worked in the property and construction industry for over 20 years, gaining a wealth of experience in all forms of property development and construction management. He has experience in dealing with all aspects of development management and construction project management, including management of complex project, initial planning, programming, cost control, cost-effective procurement, and final delivery to agreed timescale and budget. Last but not least, Dylan founded Emerge, which is now Remerge Development and Project Management Limited, in 2017, further to his previous 10 years in Mauritius, spent mostly as a senior PM. He subsequently partnered up to form Remerge Limited in 2019 to establish himself and his colleagues as a preferred service provider to the property industry. So we're just going to do a quick survey while we get Vaughan back on. Just quickly then, so the first survey goes to, which I've put together, just making sure the panelists can vote as well. And you will see that everyone, a great turnout, as I said. Thank you very much indeed, all of you. And I've got lots of comments coming in. So how many of you have attended a BIM training? Be honest, because that's the launch of a big, massive training coming forward in Mauritius. So what would be your thought, Vaughan, in terms of the statistic there? What do you think people will say in terms of BIM? I mean, does people do BIM training, or what's your thought on that one? Just unmute yourself as well, Vaughan.
Yeah, Neil, there's different aspects to BIM training. And I think very much, without a doubt, the seed of growth to BIM is understanding software. Yet there tends to be a lot of BIM wash about BIM is Revit, BIM is learning software design that it has to take through. BIM is about 3-dimension, 4-dimension. BIM is a process. And to really truly understand and get your it under your skin, you have to start somewhere. And yes, that's with software training. That is the 10%, is understanding the technology. We want to dive down deeper than that. And that was sort of the drive with Remerge, was to push the understanding of, let's understand the industry's processes. Remember, every country has its own contractual drivers. Every country has its own cultures. And that doesn't mean we have to be dictated to by the UK in the British 1192 standards, or the Singapore, the Australian standards. This is Mauritius. We've got standards. That doesn't mean we have to throw our standards out and start again. And what's exciting about this is we're going to introduce you to something we call hybrid BIM. Is we a little bit of the old, but we also look at a little bit of the new and how successful it's been as a case study. So I think that's what I'm looking forward to seeing is what
and in terms of the statistic percentage, why you're looking on your screen there, what sort of percentage are we looking in terms of BIM?
BIM is not a career. That's one thing we've got to get across the audience. There's a diversity of new fields. We're starting to see new career opportunities coming out. So once you've sort of laid the foundation within your own career as a quantity surveyor, as an architect, as an engineer, you know, the opportunities are absolutely endless, but we need to have a foundation. And that foundation is getting those essential skills, which is what we do through Exceptional BIM.
Awesome. Thank you very much indeed. And Dylan, just quickly on your experience there, I've already got the survey. I've all got the participants who voted. It's quite a tricky one, but based on your 20 years of experience in the construction industry in Mauritius as well as internationally, how do you see the participant reacting to BIM? Is it a 50-50 or should we do more? What's your thought on that?
I certainly believe we need to do more. And I think the polls will show that there's limited experience in that regard. So yeah, let's see.
Okay, so I'm going to share the result now, and there's a whopping said 46% yes, they have attended some kind of BIM training, but we've still got a 54% says no, they haven't attended a BIM training. So to me, today is the start of a BIM training. So thank you very much indeed. And I've got one more survey before we kickstart Vaughan presentation. And this is a tricky one, actually. Just making sure the panelists can vote as well. How many of you are using design software, whether it's AutoCAD, Revit, ArchiCAD? So it'd be great to know what are you using? So just quickly, while people are voting there, Vaughan, what the industry is heading towards? I can see many architect colleagues and engineers and QSs, they are moving toward Revits. Is that the right thing to say?
Interesting looking at that poll, because I'm actually looking at all the people sort of responding at the moment with your open messages. How many people we've got from Kenya, India, Nigeria, we've got Singapore, we've got Uganda, we've got Zimbabwe, we've got Cape Town, that's a country on its own, remember. We've got Johannesburg. But you know what's so fascinating about that 46% that took the poll that said they hadn't done BIM training? Maybe the question should have been, do you understand the difference between software training or BIM training? And it does excite me. I think a lot of those people on that BIM poll may have done some sort of software training, but they're looking for the BIM management training. And that's, I think, what we're going to try and nail down today, understand the difference between BIM management and what is the BIM leadership required in our industry.
All right, perfect. I'm going to share the result with you on this one. So we've got 67% still using AutoCAD, 24% Revit, 5% ArchiCAD, and 29% other. Obviously, we'll need to find out about the other. But what's your take on that? Maybe if I ask Dylan quickly, what's your take on that? As an industry, we need to try to get away from AutoCAD, right?
Well, not necessarily. Like Vaughan had mentioned, it's small steps. We don't want to go ahead and dramatically change things and force a monumental change, let's say, to shift towards Revit. Many people are experienced in AutoCAD and don't necessarily need to further their models onto Revit. It's about utilizing the information on hand and just cleverly managing that, and then ultimately gaining the experience and possibly moving forward in graduating to better type of software.
Okay, thank you. Vaughan, what's your take on that before you start presenting? And of course, to all the participants, please keep sending your comment. We really want to get the best out of Vaughan and Dylan today. So Vaughan, what's your take on this survey quickly there?
I give a good analogy. It's nice to see if on AutoCAD, there's still a lot of petrol engine drivers out there. And those that are on Revit, well done for going electric, but there's still a hybrid in between. And that's, I think, what we have to address. You can have the best of both worlds.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, everyone, for the survey. There'll be more surveys coming in as well. Morgan, take it away. Try to share your screen. And Dylan, if I can ask you to switch off your camera as well. I'll leave my on just to make sure Morgan kind of can interact with me as we go through. Morgan, take it away. And thank you very much indeed.
Thanks. Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen. Yeah, okay. All good to go.
Super. And I think just before we dive in, I think to those listeners and all those back in South Africa, moving to Mauritius with a family is probably literally one of the hardest challenges I've ever faced. It's easier opening the BIM Institute in the last 5-6 years. And I think definitely with my next book, I'm going to start maybe a book called Running the Mauritian Immigration Gauntlet, because it has been an absolute gauntlet. And I think now that this dust has started to settle in the past 6 months, I'm truly excited. I've met with a lot of companies since we've been here, and I'm really looking forward to this journey, not just within business, but also personal. So it is exciting. I've met a lot of individuals, a lot of organizations that are asking the right questions. So I think let's just dive straight into this.
Vaughan, just a quick one as well before we kickstart. There's been a few questions by a colleague called Lewis. Is Candy, is Dusk Candy's BIM? Of course, you will clarify that later, but I'm sure it's not.
Let's not associate software with BIM. Let's associate the process. Candy has one of the most powerful processes within its coding structure, its workflows. And let's not alienate the quantity surveyor, because it could be a very conscientious discussion to say who's going to go first, the quantity surveyor or the architect, if BIM comes into the market. But let's not get into that right now. And let's dive back into leadership. I think, Anil, if someone had to actually sort of break down and dissect, what do we talk about when we talk about leadership? Not just BIM leadership, but I'm looking at more digital vision or project personality. It's probably a good word that comes to mind. And I've met many BIM managers on projects where they think their vision is from a technical aspect, but they're just not. They're more towards more even you could look at an eccentric project manager who thinks they have that project personality to drive innovation, but they're more introverts. And it's not just about the person and the vision that they have. It's how you create that project personality. You have to drive a team. You are fully responsible. Just like bringing children into this world, you're taking on a responsibility that you can't expect children to look after themselves. And you have to nurture this traditional definition, as I call it. And this is more about creating a team with energy as opposed to be trying to create experts. It's about having this charisma, this underlying belief in something, and that something is working with the team. So I think it's very important that we actually understand what it's about. And that's why I want to talk about, what is that road to success? I'm not going to dive too much into as you gave me a very long portfolio introduction, but my 8 years of devoted in BIM within this industry has taught me one really important thing, is that BIM is not just about the technology. We need to look at it from a leadership perspective, promoting values that the technology has given us, especially in the last 2 years.
Just a quick one. On your screen, there's 2 square boxes. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, there's where your cursor is, just quickly there. We've got that message. Yeah, I can see that. Thank you, Francois. There's 2 square block. I don't know if it's because, one's gone, and we just the one's gone on the side.
How's that?
I think it's better now. Everybody, if you're okay with that, there's something on top of your screen blocking it. I don't know if it's that's the one. So I don't know if it's the menu for Zoom that's on top there.
Yeah, it's the menu for Zoom. Let's see if I can actually just remove that. How's that?
It will probably go in a minute, but yeah, perfect. All good. Awesome. Everybody, if you can see the screen clear now, put hands up there. Fantastic. Thank you, Vaughan.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I'm not going to dive into too much about me because I think you covered that. The really exciting part is, there's that self-proclaimed Baron of BIM, and I'm really excited on, as we said, there's that famous picture. Where did Baron of BIM come from? It's the BIMzooka, and I think again the BIMzooka is out in its full metal jacket, and I'm really looking forward to challenging these new roles that we're going to see in the industry. So that picture that has been floating around social media, that I want to address. And even though there are these key BIM management roles that we're looking at, right from BIM leaders to BIM leads, BIM managers, BIM coordinators, whatever you want to call yourself, there's various activities that appear within each of these roles, even within your discipline. And there's a striking difference between the role that you play as a BIM lead and to doing your job, what you're actually employed to do. And I think, if I think about these different perspectives and these requirements from let's say just a designer through to a quantity surveyor, through to a contractor, there is a difference between the needs of requirements of information. And if you really truly understand what it means to simulate your entire team's aspirations and these, what I call these visions of experience of working in a traditional environment, take it as AutoCAD and translate that into a digital project environment, call that Revit, while understanding the uses of technology of other disciplines such as Candy, Microsoft Project, Primavera, working with ASITE as your common data environment, integrating with BIM 360, BIM Sync. All of these are tools that are creating us this opportunity to drive innovation. And what we picked up now on Remerge, what made this a truly interesting case study, is we simply looked at how do we go from one step in creating a business with excellence in BIM. And let's just go back and look at the last 50 years. This construction industry, without a doubt, has been one of the slowest adopters of processes as well as technology within innovation. And this industry, unfortunately, globally, still relies heavily on manual labor, and now we're introducing even mechanical technology. Yet there is still a manual human factor that plays a role. And the key for leadership is how do you actually bring those two together and knit them together? These key construction technologies, let's call them that, or have risen to terms now that we look at, call it the digital twin, and the various new names given to BIM. These type of technologies play a different role, but they work together to create a platform, what we call operational excellence. Now that operational excellence, I think it's often referred to as OPEX. CAPEX is the project. OPEX is the operational performance of the building. So it's all very well to do some fancy designs and 3D models, put that into a fancy cloud, do some fancy cloud detection, do some quantity takeoff using the model. But what happens when the project is handed over? And that goes to asset management. And data now can be seen as a centralized topic of a discussion around all these related processes, depending on what role you play within the industry. And leadership in particular extends further just than people. If we look at the topics that I've got there, how do you evolve senior management? If you as a leader want to address BIM into the organization, how do you do it? How do you approach your CEO and say, I've got a great idea? How do you set up what we call a BIM central office, the BCO, with clear roles and responsibilities for individuals that you've employed within your organization? You're paying them. Now you've just got to reinvent them. We spoke about COVID resetting us. I don't think COVID reset us. COVID gave us an opportunity to reinvent ourselves. And that's what the planning has been about. We've had 2 years in lockdown to plan, develop a BIM, our own internal BIM adoption plan. You've had maybe BIM visions, BIM goals, BIM themes, BIM change management, BIM software, BIM hardware. It's just, the list carries on. But you need a requirement to put a plan together. And what really excited me when I came and joined the Remerge team is that I met a team of young, eager project managers that were asking the right questions. They were asking it, how do we define the information? We don't have a standard in Mauritius. Well, neither does South Africa, neither do 54 other countries in Africa. But they have a digital policy. And those quality assurance checks can align themselves with best practice. We look at the process of what process is involved with sharing information from a design view, taking that through to your project management, different, let's say, even within your proxy stages, stage 1 through to stage 4, and how you manage that information, looking at customer engagement. And that's what's really excited me in the last couple of months of engaging with property developers and investors who are asking the right questions. Not, are we doing BIM? They're asking, what is the actual output of the design if we put a protocol in place for the design as well as the estimating teams? When people start talking about coding, I'm not talking about computer coding. We're actually talking about the codes that actually meet apples with apples. So I think that's what's made it, for me, such an exciting process to implement at the moment. And I want to share your analogy with you, because death by PowerPoint is something that we can all relate to. And I don't want that to happen on this webinar. I'd hate my listeners to fall asleep. I want to share with you, when we hear the words Land Rover, one would probably think about an enormous SUV with tinted windows and 20, in fact, I've got a picture for you, that pompously drives around on narrow roads. I've seen it in Mauritius. In fact, I saw a green one like this today, bright, Lumo green. And it's probably never made it to a dirt road before. Yet, driving a manual car in Mauritius is a steep learning curve. That's why I think so many people drive automatics. But learning to drive competitively, especially if it's a 4x4, is a challenge. Now, learning to do BIM in automatic mode is a lot easier than going it into manual mode. But what happens when I perform special tasks that involve things such as orienteering or physical endurance like kayaking, mountain biking, stand-up paddling, while still doing your day job, which is driving a car? In the early 80s and 90s, those when I say Land Rover, will understand, depends on your age. The Camel Trophy evoked this image of what we look as a sand glow yellow sticker. And some people even bought stickers just to put on their van so they look good. But it evoked adventure, teamwork, experience, and all this encompassed into a vision with a man and machine that was pitted against probably some of the toughest terrains on earth. And this provided, let's say, the ultimate test for endurance. And there was the motto, one life, live it. And I'm going to share some interesting information. I'm giving my age away. Some of you weren't even born in 1998, if you are listening. But yet, I was fortunate enough to be selected as one of the prestigious 60 of South Africa, who, among thousands of applicants, was then later narrowed down to just 10 of us, men and women. And in fact, I think in 1998, there were just over 1 million applied applicants who went into this adventure, and only 60 were selected. And some of the similarities that I look at leadership is very similar to what I learned on the Camel Trophy. Learning how to work with a team, leading with an inexperienced team, managing these new skill sets that were out of my comfort zone. I certainly didn't know how to drive a 4x4. In fact, I rolled the one on the day that I was given a chance. And at times it was quite terrifying driving into water of the unknown. And remember, one lapse of judgment or error led to serious consequences. I'll share some pictures with you. But that was a process, and no different from our involvement as a project manager, as a designer, as a quantity surveyor. You need to stand firmly in control of the various components that your task is related to. You need to negotiate yourself around various obstacles that lead to good leadership skills. So on the Camel Trophy, it was for us, it's like, as I said, it's an off-road challenge. You needed to learn to speak and influence your ideas and your visions, because they will only die on your lips if you're not able to influence others and learn from others at the same time. And putting 4 guys into a van and having to listen to 4 of them at the same time created this state of vapor in the vehicle. Now, you try to put 4 egotistic men into a vehicle and tell them, you know, who's going to be the leader. It's about, leadership's about learning the past, the present, as well as the future. It's about making decisions that will determine your outcome. And you might not seem that you honestly believe that learning is a continuous process. Something I learned from, it was Simon Sinek that said, I guess life is about learning to see if the glass is half full and ignoring that the glass is actually half empty. And one thing that education has taught me, especially during this lockdown period, is the ability to see an emptiness of a half a glass while choosing to focus on the fullness of other glasses around me. And that's what got me here to Mauritius. When we started engaging with Remerge almost a year and a half ago, the connecting points between Dylan and myself were really touch points that we saw an ability to define the uselessness and the usefulness of information. And that this pandemic has led to us being where we are today. And that's what I think we're going to share with you. Choosing the right path, you as a leader, doesn't mean you have to quit your job tomorrow and try to become a BIM leader. I think one of the biggest lessons I learned with hundreds of clients around the world dealing with projects is that when you're thrown into a deep water environment, as you can see here on the camel trophy, what we experienced, and you're having that literally that sinking feeling, there's a reason the snorkel is above the water. And the reason is that so you don't choke your vehicle, because that's the only tool, weapon you have to get you out of the, call it the crap, if you want. Our environment is no different. When you go into a project, you have to have the right tools. You can't dive into a project with a certificate and a cap and a pair of swimming goggles and say, I'm a swimming instructor. And when you dive into the deep end, you sink. You have to know what you're facing. So this, whether you like it or not, you as a leader have to have these uncomfortable conversations. And be it about software. If you want to fight arguments about which is better, Revit or ArchiCAD, that's a subject. Let's bring it to the table. Or, you know, if you create a discussion that leads to a team or an individual that feels left out, and they go back to the old ways, what we call the autopilot way of thinking, because he's feeling uncomfortable in the environment he's in. Now, learning those skills is what we call self-education. You can't pick that up in a CPD course like the old days where you sit in a room and your company pays you a salary and you're sitting just because you need CPD. You know, achieving a Revit certificate, I'm not running Revit down, I love Revit. I have Revit 22. I think the tool is absolutely incredible what it offers. But having a certificate does not make you a BIM expert. And it certainly doesn't give you the sense of grasping a full understanding of what the industry wants when we say digital twin. And doing a course is, let's say, what we call a marker in this infinite race. After particularly a grueling race that you've just run, where you think you've just done a course. Unfortunately, it was also a book that I read that spoke about the infinite mindset against the finite mindset. And I think in our industry, we've got so many finite people dealing with infinite technology that's led us to where we are today. And I love this picture because in this picture, you know, no offense to individuals or disciplines, but this was a true environment where you can see almost the architect in the back. No offense to architect. He's saying exactly that. He says, it's not my fault. You know? And you check the engineers in the background going, I knew this would happen. And I like probably Dylan diving in the background there going, let's get in, boys. I have to fix this problem. You know, I think a big lesson we've learned with around this industry is that, you know, we're so quick to dive in to look the best pieces of software when it's actually sitting right in front of us. I spent now trying to buy an electric car, and I've researched so many cars. In fact, Dylan and his staff mocked me on the different types of cars I was going to buy. And then I looked at a hybrid and I went, but hang on, I'm not ready for electric. I want to go hybrid. And while I worked for CCS in Cape Town for 7 years, this was a picture on their wall that I looked at every single day. And it reminds me so much of this industry, that we're so busy doing what we know, yet someone's got a smart idea that actually will help us, yet we're too embarrassed to ask. And that this open conversation that we're having creates this environment where we actually need to maybe just look around and ask for help. And I go back to that camel trophy. This wasn't one of the adventures I was on, but it was one of the ones in the Congo, not the Congo, Brazil, where, you know, it begs this question of how we work together. You know, don't forget, every team, as I said before, comes with their own baggage. And especially when we've got traditional ways of working, and you tell, let's say, a quantity surveyor that we now have to do an automatic quantity takeoff the model, there's no measurement of paper anymore. You're going to throw the team into a state of vapor, especially when he doesn't have the software to do the quantity takeoff. And this becomes an issue if your personal motivations don't mirror those of the company or the project team. And I think in many cases, it might be the company that's not necessarily changing. And that's where we see this adverse effect happening. Remember, it's easy to assume bureaucracy and politics for large organizations. And most of us, or let's say, are startups with small teams. And I think sometimes these problems tend to rear their ugly heads in smaller companies when directors and smaller staff teams don't share a common goal or a future. There's this discussion about the old versus the new. Now, you know, there's no favoritism to certain piece of software. I'm just mentioning.
And Vaughan, just a quick one on this, Vaughan, just to give you a quick breather. I've got a question on this one, which is kind of linked with the slide as well. How many professionals use the following CDE on projects? So is it A-Site, BIM 360, A-Connect, or BIM Sync, or others? So how many of you are using the following CDE on project? Of course, A-Site, and Vaughan, just quickly, what's CDE?
Common data environment. So it's, again, it's a new terminology. We all
common data environment.
Yeah, another word for document management, but we're not allowed to say those words in, because that's tenure. That's before COVID.
Okay, so it'd be great to see how many of you are using it, and it'd be great to just put some context as I saw this slide there with the old versus new. I'm just going to end the poll now and share the result. We've got 6% for A-Site, 34% for BIM 360. Just quickly, Vaughan, BIM 60, is it Autodesk?
It is. So again, it's a really good design tool for collaboration, and it does venture into parts of construction collaboration. And I think that's where A-Site and A-Connect sort of really are sort of the leaders in their field of expertise, where we cover information from cradle to grave. But there's no reason why these tools can't be interconnected, which they should be. What really fascinates me about that poll is the other. It scares me that I think it's things such as Google Drive and Dropbox and tools that unfortunately are not even SharePoints in that other, by the way, that they're not industry specific. And I think it's not a bad thing, because I think it's teaching us to manage information digitally. So it's not a bad poll.
All right. Thank you very much indeed for that one. And then we've got one more before you can get started. And this one is quite a good one as well. How many users are applying a BIM execution plan on the project? So just like we have the PP, I guess, project execution plan. So it'd be good to see how many of you are actually, you've got a plan and you're executing it as part of the BIM execution plan. So the questions, the answers are most of your project, only when requested, not yet. Quickly then, I'll give you 30 seconds. Vaughan, what's your thought on this one? I mean, do we really need to have a BIM execution plan?
That is a very good question. And interesting enough, we do not anymore promote BIM execution plan.
Wow.
It's a word that, or a, should we say, a statement that really is misunderstood by many in the industry. And unfortunately, often a BEP, you call it as an acronym, often never goes further than the design stages of a project. And the contractor doesn't get to understand what a BIM execution plan is. He never gets involved with it unless it's a turnkey project or even a design build project. We've introduced new protocols where we rather refer to it as the design protocol. And that remains within the design protocol, which is based on a BIM execution plan. But what about the estimators protocol? What about the contractors protocol? Those are the key things we look at now, is defining a protocol that aligns with your service level agreement within, let's say, your, even call it your proxy contract.
Okay, so Vaughan, just quickly there, we've got the results. 11% says yes, 23% say only when requested, but we still got a whopping, stunning 66% says no. So kind of aligned with what you just said there.
Yeah, I think the not yet could be maybe a 50-50, is that either they've ventured onto their own design protocols and they're not necessarily following a BIM execution plan. Could be called a project execution plan.
Okay.
Yet, what does interest me about that, Neil, is that remember, a BIM execution plan is not a contractual document. It's not a legally binding contract. It's a guideline for the team to adhere to ways of working. By introducing a protocol, becomes a contractually obligated agreement between the designers, and then the same goes for estimating as well as the contractors. So that is a key aspect that we've picked up, is you can resist the BIM execution plan. You don't have, you're not forced to sell it. You didn't sign off. It's not part of your contract agreement. So those are things we've started to pick up in the industry, is that it's sometimes a very heavy document that's read only once and no one ever looks at it ever again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vaughan.
All right, so I just want to go back before, we bring Dylan in on this, but, I think if we look around today, I make reference to Bluebeam. We love Bluebeam. We use it on quite a few of our projects at the moment because it associates well with other tools. And let's not forget that PDF is here to stay. Excel is here to stay. These are, call them affairs that we have, but we just don't talk about them because rather talk about the industry technology. And this technology is developed at absolutely an exponential rate that comes across, let's say, a whole range of governing factors within organizations that they have to make the decision, do they adopt them, do they buy them or not? And this includes costs for procurement, cost ownership, upgrading, all these things, companies need to consider when they're running on technology that might be outdated, and that's holding them back. And that is one key we've picked up, especially on a recent project that we're busy with now, is that the cost for BIM was not included, simply because the teams have their software. And that hybrid process that we're looking at allows the individuals to manage information based on a static way of working. And I think these are the BIM site tools that I think we need to look at, is how does Bluebeam play an interest with ASITE. ASITE we use as a common data environment on projects. BIM 360 is used within the design phase. But we need to find a medium tool that works for all of us. And that's why I love that picture that talks about the old versus the new. They all have a place in our industry. BIM leadership. I want to go back to the roles of technology, leadership, and people. These are just some snapshots that I took of, that I found out of the magazine of, what is leadership? How do we define the role of technology in our industry? And how do we get people to become more a team player? Let's take the QS role as a quantity surveyor. It's by no means a very demanding, varied profession, as you know, Daniel, that I think requires a strong set of fundamental skills, and that comes with an accredited tertiary qualification, like any other profession. Yet the baseline of a quantity surveyor, when he comes out of university or Technicon, must possess these advanced skills to be able to do financial management, numeracy skills, the ability to solve management problems. And if we look at this modern age of a cost manager, not a quantity surveyor, a cost manager, we have to adopt his IT skills. He needs to have the ability to learn new software that's based on the requirements of the project. And I think there's this much needed efficiency that can only be achieved through this, call it this fundamental shift of building standards, as well as quantity surveying standards. And I've said this before, you know, every country, especially in Africa, has its own legislative as well as its cultural drivers.
Absolutely.
And we can't just go and ditch standard method of measurement because the world has moved on to new rules of measurement. And I know Mauritius works on standard method of measurement, so does 54 countries in Africa. We can't just go and ditch our rules of measurement because BIM is here. We have to adopt a way of working that works for us as an organization, that will bleed into government associations and sectors that allow us to then start talking about visualization and coordination and improve our operations, depending if it's private or public sector. And that's what I think, you know, from my side, that is leadership. And what I've spoken about now, pretty much in the last I think it's half an hour, 40 minutes, is how did we take a company like Remerge, that is also one of the well-known and well-preferred service providers in the industry here in South Africa, Mauritius, where we looked at the organization, and the first question we rose is, what is constructive courage in a project management world? And around that, Dylan and I sat for weeks on end in my initial entry into Mauritius to try and identify and understand the fundamentals of what the business was about. So we looked at the industry, we looked at the business strategy, we looked at project strategy, and then we looked at fully understanding why and how each fundamental, or call it an essential skill, is actually going to be applied, not just as a project manager, but how do we encroach on other companies and bring them into not a collaborative way of working. I hate that word collaborative. It's very 80s, 90s thinking. We've come through 3 years of thinking more of a connected way of working. How do we find partners where we're not ticking boxes to see if you're an expert, we're ticking boxes because you're enthusiastic to take the next step, to find the next project. You know, and that's where we, you know, I think Dylan came up with exactly that saying. It's the perfect mix of experience and advancing technologies. And that's what makes it so exciting, what we've done. I know you introduced Dylan earlier, but I know he's online. And Dylan, I know I've really been talking my mouth off here. Are you still there? You're awake. So
we'll leave it to you. Carry on.
You know, I think Dylan's worked in this property and construction sector for more than 20 years, and he knows the rule of the land, and comes with this wealth of experience that not only just forms within the property development, but it carries into project management as well as construction management. And that's what made it so exciting for me, is to see an opportunity to take BIM from concept design stage, work with teams, work with property developers, work with investors, and gain that excitement that leads to the next level, the next stage, that we bring it all together, where we look at pre-planning, feasibility studies. And I think that's where Dylan and I sort of got these touch points, where we really saw an opportunity to change the way industry works. Dylan, are you there?
Yeah. So I think from when Vaughan and I initially started talking, there was this need to reinvent ourselves. And it was quite important that Remerge as a company focused on moving forward. Often in the past, we were very dismissive of new technologies being employed, which would stunt the progression in a project, particularly through the construction stages. And I think by then bringing a bit of a vision for the industry, particularly focused in Mauritius for now, and Vaughan's experienced hand, it's this ability then to recognize what needs to be done in the future and how things can be changed through automation, digitization, and simply moving, forward, so that we make the jump, the much needed leap into the future.
And just quickly, Dylan, as well, I mean, when Vaughan started on the slide, he talked about business excellence in BIM, and he talked about the 6 factors there: leadership, planning, information process, people and capability, and customer engagement. But of course, with your experience now in Mauritius as well, do you feel that it's high time that we really embrace it from top to down?
Yes, we need to embrace it, but we don't have to full-heartedly jump into it. I think approaching it in small steps will go a lot further than simply trying to immerse oneself too much, where you may overcook yourself, so to say.
And Vaughan, just quickly as well, on your side, a lot of people will say BIM is expensive, BIM is complicated, we would like to do the traditional way. Why fix it when it is not broken? What's your thought on that, Vaughan?
Yeah, I think if you answer that question, I'm just reading through a lot of the questions on the.
We'll pick them up shortly. Yeah,
there's some really, really nice questions here, and I really want to address them. In specific, to come back to that question you just answered, is that BIM itself is not software. And I think that's the key we've got to keep asking ourselves, is that even the question about, if BIM is not mandated by a government, well, then how are you going to proceed further in getting it into the business? How do we commit people to move to a BIM environment? This is what really changed my way of practicing what I preach, where we've now got an organization that did exactly that, and how we've merged the software into the process, and how we've taken that process into the asset management environment. So BIM is not just about design, it's not just about QSing. In fact, the asset management is the output. And talking to a lot of the industry design teams and that, they're talking to asset managers already. But the key is, how do we put that together?
Absolutely.
And I think there's some really nice Q&As here that I'd like to dive into later.
Yeah, let me just pick up the Q&A quickly. If I start with the first one with Dylan on this one, how can we make people shift from traditional CAD to adopt BIM technology if BIM is not mandatory by the government? So obviously in the UK, there's the level 2, which is mandatory. But what's your thought on this, Dylan? If the government is not taking the initiative, I'm sure the private sector, a company like yourself, is to look into pushing it, right?
So that's exactly what we've done. And our vision was to actually start from the head so that it trickles down into the industry. I think what we had strategized was to approach pretty much most of the influential client base and developers in the country, and start approaching them from that level to say, if you guys adopt this hybrid BIM theory, it will force both consultants and contractors to adopt what your policies are. So in essence, what we were saying is advise or implement a form of policy that is recognized across Mauritius, and then start enforcing that, and then let it trickle down. And that's pretty much where we're at now at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Dylan. Vaughan, just quickly, there's a question from an anonymous attendee. Is BIM specific to architect and quantity surveyors, or is there also an application for it as a property developer, asset manager? If so, what may this application be? Just unmute yourself, yeah.
Neil, the best way to answer that, BIM is not a career, it's a process. And how each discipline adopts it is going to lead to the outcome of the next discipline or the next project. So whatever discipline you're in, it doesn't really make a difference between, is there a role within asset management for BIM? There's, without a doubt, that is the outcome. Why do we do BIM? It's because there's a life cycle of a project that has a cradle. They used to call it cradle to grave.
Yes.
Project may not necessarily die. You might bring it back to life by doing an alteration. So it becomes cradle to cradle. But in that whole process is a series of tasks that we're going to show you what we've done on this case study, was how we took information from different disciplines and made it become more of a usable, friendly environment. And I think, you know, as I said, as the users there, line Kim asked the question of the conundrum between Revit and BIM. Revit is a tool, and that tool provides information for the next profession. And that next professional may not be using Revit. He may be using CCS Candy or CostX as a tool. But the information you're going to give him is going to help him provide information for the next user, who's the contractor. Here in Mauritius, we've already seen a lot of contractors who are diving into BIM Revit courses. That's fantastic. But Revit's not the output for them. They have to still do monthly valuations, bills of quantities. Revit doesn't do that. Revit only gives you a schedule of quantities. Then you can start the remodeling process. So it's really what, as a leader or trying to get into BIM, you need to understand how the person after you will benefit from information. That is BIM.
Awesome. There's a question for Dylan there. It's coming from Kim. Based on your experience, Dylan, have you seen client committed to move to BIM? I'm sure you've dealt with you're dealing with a flitter of client and stakeholders. What can you see out there?
So generally, there's a definite want to move over to a digital policy. People are very aware that there is this need. Many of them have also almost, dare I say, been caught a little bit with their pants down, not moving fast enough. But so to cut a long answer short, yes, they have, and yes, they want to move forward.
Just quickly then, in terms of the financial conundrum, again, I'm sure there'll be a question coming up later. How do we, I think there's already there, I can see conundrum there, Kim put stuff, but in terms of financially, do we contribute as a team to get BIM going, or whose responsibility is to pay for it? What can you see on the ground? What's happening right now?
Well, here's a good analogy. If I approached a contractor who told me we need to, as a team, the client must buy the crane for the project, because without the crane, we actually can't build properly. So can you please buy the crane? Well, okay, he buys the crane for that project. And the next project, the client gets the benefit of the crane. That's not fair. So the question goes back to Revit. You can charge a client to buy the license for Revit, but then the benefit goes to the next client because, hey, thanks for, you know, the hard work and the dirty work, but I'm now going to benefit because we put one license of Revit through your project. That is an operational cost, and you have to factor that cost into the way you work. How many projects are you going to take on? Can you allocate that cost? Putting an common data environment platform onto a project can be seen as a cost to the project, and you can allow each discipline to factor that cost into their tender. You can't factor it into the design fees or the professional fees. That just doesn't work that way. You can have a client who's willing to prepare to pay for certain software like ASITE or BIM 360, but generally you tend to find architects pay for BIM 360 because they have multiple projects on that platform. So it's very difficult to put a cost to BIM, and I don't see any industry profession who actually should, because if you are, you're doing it wrong. It's not the way to factor money on software.
Absolutely. Just quickly there, Yasser, a colleague of mine, contract manager, he's on the ground and he's saying there's an ongoing Camel Trophy adventure right now, which you talked about. So Yasser, thank you very much indeed for that one. There was a question before, obviously Kim asked, how do we clear the myth that Revit is not BIM? Do we write more about it? Do we do more webinar, or do we get people like yourself to start giving us training here in Mauritius? Because a lot of people think that Revit is BIM.
Yeah, I can agree with Kim. I mean, it's a common discussion every day in any passageway where you meet people, when you actually even say to them, I'm here to help you with BIM. And the response is, oh, we're doing BIM. No, we've got 4 licenses of Revit. We've got a BIM manager. He's done his license. We've got trainers now on BIM, and they're just Revit trainers. I have to truly honestly say that, you know, without planting the seed, which is a design tool, you know, BIM starts with a design. And we've worked now to understand how even AutoCAD has a place. And it's very important we understand the tool has a place. The CCS Candy has a place. WinQS has a place. Microsoft Project has a place. Your facilities management software has a place with BIM. But everyone does BIM wash, I call it. It is the BIM wash of the world. We always talk about Revit, Revit, Revit. Revit is BIM. No, Revit's not BIM. But it is a tool for a designer that participates in the BIM process. And that's the education we have to start teaching industry now, is say, let's talk about BIM as Revit. Let's talk about how Revit is going to benefit the team on this project that's using BIM.
Absolutely. Just quick one there as well, Vaughan, before I move on to Dylan. There's a question from Kalpana, project manager for a big client here in Mauritius. Do you have links to articles or studies that have proven that moving to a BIM way of working bring monetary values and benefit, as at the end of the day, that's what all matters. It's all about money and savings and doing value engineering. So what's your take before I get to Dylan on the value engineering side of things? Or, you know,
yeah,
does it bring monetary value to us?
There's an excellent case study that'll answer all your questions. If you want to take a pen down, you can write it down. It's called Google, right? And it'll answer all your questions.
Okay. Yeah, we've heard of it. Yeah.
It might not work in Russia right now, but it does work.
Awesome. But you are working, you've got case studies, of course, as part of the training that you could look into, making sure there's less rework, less abortive work, as well as making sure the client get what he wants at the end of the day.
Yeah, jokes aside, look, there's many case studies. It just depends on what field of expertise you're in. If you're a designer, yes, there's case studies for that. If you're a quantity surveyor, there's case studies for that. And that's what we actually introduced with what we've, through Exceptional BIM, we actually have those guidelines for the professions. We've developed them. They're available to you. And that's what we're opening up the invitation right now, is to say, what field are you in? We'll provide those guidelines for you to help drive the job in the right direction, using the case studies that we know that we've absorbed from hundreds of countries. And that was the beauty about BIM Institute, is that we absorbed thousands and thousands of hours of knowledge over 8 years that we could now share with industry. So that's what Exceptional BIM gives you. It's just, you need to log in and actually understand where that information is sitting.
Dylan, just a quick one at the back of that one. In terms of what sort of strategy are you looking at from a project management point of view, approaching project management, project managers in Mauritius and in Africa? What sort of strategy are you taking to make sure like we start embracing it from a project manager's point of view and then cascade down to the designers? What's your thought process there coming from a leader?
So what's very important is, as a project manager, you're defining processes. Right from the start, you're going to define a process. You're going to implement that process, and you're going to ensure that that process is being followed. And if you're implementing a process that is digitizing certain actions, this forms part of your project management and how you implement it and how you ensure that its implementation is effective. And that's very simply put, is process management, just in a digitized model.
Absolutely. Dylan, just quick, I've got another question for you before. I know Vaughan's got more slides. We've only got 25 minutes left. And there's a question from an anonymous attendee. I have noticed that most people turning to BIM are the young generation. Most of the seniors don't want to change their way of doing things. So, I mean, we've got two seniors here. Are you guys, what's your advice to the seniors? And are you guys changing? So this is good to Dylan first.
I'm hopefully in between the two. I'm still consider myself junior. But yes, I think it's been globally recognized that there is the shift that is needed. So regardless of junior or senior, I think the industry has recognized that it needs to move on. In your European countries, for instance, that they're already well advanced. In developing countries, obviously not, and therefore Vaughan's focused in the greater Africa.
Awesome. And Vaughan, obviously, what's your advice to senior practitioners listening to you? What's your advice to them? Don't be afraid. Just unmute yourself, Vaughan. You seem you're not familiar with technology there, Vaughan.
Catches us at the best of times.
Yeah. So yeah, what's your advice quickly, Vaughan?
Neil, I think that the difference between a qualification, regardless of your age, and your experience, I think is becoming ever more stark globally. And we look at our most experienced hands out there, regardless of your age and the field, but that many, again, depending on your profession, are looking out to a future that we don't even recognize. We've changed. We've seen how in just in a decade, how we've changed with automation, with digitization, with globalization. We simply cannot ignore the fact that human intelligence, all right, has to continue to dive into this exciting, streamlined way of working. We went from the checkbook to the app. There's still some, I'm finding that a lot of people use the checkbook here in Mauritius. It's quite interesting. But that jump from checkbook to app was AI. It was artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And this next generation of younger people are changing the way we think as builders, as designers and engineers. And, sorry, let's not leave out the contractors. And how we bring all of this back, it is beyond me exciting. And it is exciting when you see the old guys like myself who have some knowledge that they're going to, offer this environment.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Vaughan, you've got a few slides to go through, right?
Yeah. So I think where I want to dive into is how do we prepare for this change? And this is where Dylan and I saw this opportunity. A good approach is to understand what your client's requirement is, to be able to walk the talk and have a chance for your business to show you that wow factor. You only get one chance to present properly. And if it's going to be in 3D models, just make sure you don't send the team that's in that office into a state of vapor, because you have an opportunity now to present your toolbox, be it Revit, be it CCS Candy, be it Costex or A-Site. That tool must be the correct weapon. I call it the weapons of choice, because when you go into that front and that front line, you need to know what you're up against. You need to fully understand what the output is with that environment. And that's, I think, with Dylan and I just want to, in the next 20 minutes, is talk about how we prepared this organization, and even on a couple of projects we've rolled out now, where it is actually becoming part of our program. Dylan, you might want to add to that.
Yeah, I think as a leader, you need to understand the lay of the land in terms of how you need to tackle a project. For example, what are your clients' deliverable requirements? Do we go in certain circumstances in implementing a digital strategy, which means throw the paper out and only use PDF, or does it then revert back to business as normal, and then if that is the case, how do we then ultimately hand it over to the asset managers as a management tool? We've also got that element of internal staff and external stakeholders within the project, and you know, advising that there's a change, but then when you're trying to implement it, it's the harder part of the project. Yeah. So by bringing someone in that's knowledgeable and with hands-on experiences, it obviously enables that as a better process. Yeah, so I mean, you know, in leadership, the right skills and the right team make work a lot easier. Yeah. And that's what I think is key. And you know, so the leadership would be then to be showing how to adopt to the change, implement, train, and then guiding through the various processes.
Absolutely. Vaughan?
Yeah, I think, you know, as Dylan was saying, there's no doubt that I certainly always like to take the spotlight in training. As you can see, there's always spotlights in the room. But that's exactly why we showed those points with you, is preparation. You know, any good approach to a project needs to come with, let's say, even a clear project brief. And it's a chance for you to take notes, you know, answer the right questions at that brief, and check your toolbox. Make sure you have the right instructions to deliver what now we call the exchange information requirements, the ERR, as they call it in the ISO 19650. Have that clear plan of action for your team. When we did the training here with Remerge team, there was that almost that silent space where the team just, you know, didn't quite know what questions to ask. It's again like that camel trophy I was on, where it was most important that it was no good entering an environment that you felt you were inefficient or inexperienced, because immediately you let the team down. You've got to give your best. It's going to be tough, no doubt about it. You're going to have to learn more than just the software that you're good at. And I think, you know, there again, Dylan, you might want to add to that particular.
Yeah, I mean, exactly, almost reiterating what I said earlier on. It's those, you know, the leadership in assessing the lay of the land. You know, what is the digital strategy? Yeah, is the project you know, identified as a brown or green field? We're coming up with quite a few of those different projects nowadays. And as Vaughan said, it's very important to have that right team with the skills and the ability to work with them.
Yeah, and I think that brought us onto the second is you know, we had to look initially at the organizations. How do we get that gear right? Now, that gear exists of different types of software, different understanding how the architect delivers a model. What's really in that model? Is it the lights are on, but nobody's home? Is it an empty shell? Does it look good on the outside? What data was in that? And can I use the data? Do I trust the quantification on the model in order to produce a bill of quantities? The extraction of the quantities out of that model, do I rely on them, or do I have to do further investigation? You know, it was the same on Camel Trophy. Having the right vehicle to do the job did not mean it would be a success. You know, I could have put that gold Range Rover to its task. I can promise you it wouldn't have gone very far. Yet, you know, there's this thing about technology can also be compromising. And I think that's the first thing we identified here in this organization, is that we didn't go out and start buying all these fancy softwares. We actually went back to the simple basics and we said, what is king? 2D. 2D PDF is king. It's the information that you dissect from a 3D model. Remember, at an FM level, your troops on the ground, call them your workhorses, they couldn't care about your 3D model. You tell him to go fix the air conditioning unit in the room. He's not going to drive through using a 3D model on his phone. He's simply going to walk into this room. He's going to look upstairs and go, is that the one that's broken? Yes. Right.
Yeah.
I need the specification. I don't want to know the data because that's not what I'm here for. I want to know how to fix it. I have a toolbox. I came with the tools because I had a PDF document that told me which tools to bring. I knew where to go and order the light because the unit, because it came from a manufacturer. I've got the parts. Now I need to put through a purchase order.
Absolutely.
It's about that code. And I think that's where we've missed the point. The software is fantastic. It's the output that is at the end of the game, the really important factor.
Absolutely.
And that plays 2D. You know, it's how you transcend the information down to the 3D model that is going to be the output, which is the important factor at the end of the day for the team.
I think if we all think about how we had all envisaged what the future was going to be, I'm sure most of us thought that many of these software applications that were going to come at some point in time were almost going to be able to replace the engineer, the designer. But we've soon realized that's obviously not the case. There's applicable software that still requires the human touch, and it's specific for its environment. So, you know, being able to select that right software that can still openly interact with each other on different platforms is quite a key in being able to successfully move forward in a project.
Yeah, and just a quick one, guys. Just quickly, I've got a survey here which I want to share with the team as well, as we get to the an in-depth conversation of what talk about leadership and talking about the 3D and the software and aligning those software with each other to look at the bigger picture. So the question here is, have you applied cost code within your 3D model for costing purposes? So Paul, can you just educate us a bit more on that one? I know we've done a few workshops in Mauritius a few years ago when you showed us like within seconds how you can do a BOQ, which everybody said wow in the room. Maybe if you can touch a few words as we get the participant to vote in.
So you're reading my mind because I was thinking about that model exactly at the same time. And I think that's why I'm raising the next slide. I jump slides because I see the time. That there is what they say, you know, having a second language is like having a second soul. And it's a strong statement that crafts reality. But it goes as far as saying that to have a deep understanding of the work breakdown structure has the ability to speak a digital language. And that helps you craft this digital code that is exactly what you're talking about. You look at this drawing that I'm showing now on the screen.
Can you share your screen because we can't see it? Okay, so while Morgan is sharing that fantastic. Yeah, we can see it now. And I'm just going to end the poll there, Morgan, just before we kick off. And here we go. So 11% says, yes, they have applied cost code within their 3D model, but we've got a whopping 89% saying no. Take it away.
I love that because I'm going to make the penny drop why we like codes, especially if you're QS listening. We work codes with all the day. That second language I'm talking about is a code. So if you look at the image that I'm showing you, talk about a digital twin. In fact, we met today with developers that are talking about sensors, putting sensors onto their projects. Now, it's all very well when you talk about a QS who has a code to cost. We talk about an architect who has a particular UID code within Revit. We talk about a planner who has a task code. We talk about FM who has a task code. Think about a connected sensor. If you walk through a door and that information is being passed through an Excel spreadsheet, and we want to know how many times the light got switched on by sensors. We want to know how many times the toilet was flushed. We want to know how many times the aircon was used in the room. That is data. Now that data has to go back to a code. That code has nothing to do with the naming convention within your common data environment. That's a document code. That's what we've been brain drained and indoctrinated that ISO 19650 is all about code, code, code. That's the naming convention. What about the code? It's finding that code that is what everyone's talking about in us next round is attention to detail.
Yeah.
That attention to detail is not about us doing workflows and understanding the identity and the data exchange and how we get that information from one application to the other. When you do application exchange, it has to align with a code. You need to understand those codes need to talk to each other. And that's the screenshot that you see now. Think about the design, the estimating, the planning, the construction. Even they all have a resource type that has to be assigned. They all have trades. We look at scheduling, costing, the data from connected sensors. What we have decided, well, what we have identified within Remerge and Exceptional BIM working together, everyone dives into what we refer to as level 3 control. That is project codes, project naming conventions, material codes, cost codes, ledger codes, and the list goes on. What about the first level of control in identifying the code that everyone will talk to? Now, any QS that's listening, we know about ICMS, the International Construction Measurement Standard, is a code. Imagine applying that code from the very beginning of your project. The architect will say, but I'm not a QS, I don't know where that code goes. You're not supposed to. But that code will help us identify file naming, design codes, construction codes, cost codes, ledger codes. This is where we've seen it work so seamlessly. And you know, Dylan, jump in here if you can about that code and how it's worked for us internally on projects.
Yeah, so I think apart from, you know, identifying a naming convention, this coding is sort of the next step. And this is why we've successfully implemented it on many of the projects moving forward, is this coding.
Unmute yourself. Yeah.
Sorry, I think where Dylan's also, you know, pushing, if you look at things such as your resource list, that's information always starts with a resource. May it be a material cost or a labor cost, even our professional fees. How do you associate your time in timesheets? That's a code that you have to put. If you look at your specifications, every specification of a light, an air conditioning, a projector, a laptop, it has to be assigned to a code. So, you know, what's nice about taking it at a top level down is making sure that that code becomes a standardized code right throughout the project. You don't necessarily have to force it on the team, but in a project management environment, we start identifying what that code is going to be and how do we introduce it to the team for best practice. Yeah, so I'm going to just jump to our next slide because I'm just looking at time. You know, whatever Dylan and I have spoken about now, you know, you can't squeeze it all into an hour and a half. It's impossible. The fundamental skill that I want to share with those listeners is, you know, when we talk about maintaining momentum, something that was interesting on the Camel Trophy was that in the final stages of the event, we witnessed these fellow competitors who helped teaming up, we called it slaying the bigger dragon, which was the finish line. We all wanted to finish, we all wanted to be successful. But we came to realize that this momentum was a powerful advantage for us at certain stages of the events to stick together. And you could always go by that saying that says, you know, quitters never win and winners never quit. I think as an industry leader, a BIM leader, you're not alone. You have the support of the people around you. And I think this is what makes it great about this island. There's small hubs of communities, BIM hubs that have got together. There's this online, there's LinkedIn. You know, we're here to help. You know, you don't have to run this gauntlet on your own. You don't have to move from South Africa to Mauritius on your own. There's people out there that can help you. Trust me, you need it. And yeah, Dylan, do you want to throw in your advice on that?
Not so much about the relocation. And I guess one of the things that you could identify in that image is you could be a quitter if you wanted to stop smoking camels. But on a more serious note, you know, once you've implemented these processes in-house and your team with a leader starts following these BIM process, you start really seeing the momentum, which is very continuous and positive. We've now started to implement this as of Vaughan's, let's call it culmination into our in-house training onto the various, even small projects that are coming in, and we initially always finding this resistance, this push, you know, BIM, it's going to take time, it's going to waste this, and it's going to, and you know, 5 minutes later of Vaughan just sort of explaining processes and how this could help, not forcing it. We almost, let's say, have converts coming to the line, and so it's good to see that people are open-minded and are willing to venture down this path. And I think that's what's key in our industry.
Absolutely.
I think, Neil, we're going to jump onto the last slide here because of time. And I think in closing, I'm hoping that we have, you know, a full tank of people that have listened to us and are ready to take the next level. That also involves, you know, pick up the phone, let's see if we can help you tomorrow. But I think if you look at all the pressures around us right now, even if we treat our competition versus the rivalry, be it the software vendors are continuously bombarding us with new applications, new upgrades, maintenance fees, these everyday pressures on us are not only there to attain your executive level, but I think as managers and teams, we become overwhelmed with all this information. And I think my advice is to everyone is just to take a step back and go back to your absolute basics. You don't go back to autopilot, that won't help. But we all too often are forced to prioritize short term instead of looking at the long term. And the question always have to ask ourselves, what is the output based on the input? How am I going to benefit the person I work with based on my technological skill that will benefit him in the future?
Absolutely.
And I think that's the message, you know, after an hour and a half, I really want people to take sit back and say to myself, how am I going to benefit the people that work with me, not just think about myself all the time?
Okay, thank you, Vaughan. We've got Suzanne just mentioned as well, the function of applying cost code to 3D model would be a time saving and quality assurance too. It speaks to Vaughan's term of connective ways of working between designers and quantity surveyors. Just Rennie said, just a comment, the BIM convert are like evangelists, as when they see the light, they want everyone to embrace it. Just how to convert the leaders. So just quickly, as I conclude, guys, I just want to share this with you, just making sure we've got that final survey done. Just the final survey, oops, just making sure I've got that, the final survey. So yeah, so making sure, okay, so before we conclude, I've got a final survey. Thank you, Vaughan, the Baron of BIM, and Dylan, of course, founder and managing director of Remerge. So from the bottom of our heart and on behalf of all participants today, endless thanks for your invaluable time and for giving back and for inspiring all of us. So we've got a quick survey before we pick up the wisdom from you. I just want to share this survey as well to all of us. And I'm just going to make sure the panelists can vote. Based on the presentation today, guys, are you inspired? I'm sure there's going to be more workshops coming up and keen to explore BIM and its application. So I'm really excited about the whole thing. And to me, we can talk all night long there, Vaughan.
Yeah, absolutely, Neil. I'm still trying to find out what the question is that you're asking.
So the question is, based on the presentation today, are you inspired and keen to explore BIM and its application?
Yeah, I think, as I said, the Baron of BIM has spoken. There's the evangelism behind, dusk till dawn. Literally, my wife would probably tell you I'm having an affair online right now because I'm not home, I'm in the office. So the key, I think, for everyone is to understand the enthusiasm and to take away that you're not going to get it right tonight. You're not going to get it right tomorrow. And it's a learning. It's a journey. Don't treat this as a sprint. It's not a race. There's no finishing line here. It's a real journey, and you have to find which path you're going to take. And all paths will lead to one. And I'm sure you'll find me on one of those paths. But
okay,
just keep moving forward. That's all I have to say.
And Dylan, just quickly, based on the presentation today, what do you think the percentage would be from the participant today, based on your 20 years of experience?
I'm going to be very disappointed if we get a lot of no's.
Okay, so
I'm
here
going
we
to send
go.
Vaughan back to South Africa.
All right, so we've got 100% says yes, they are keen, and we've got 100 people watching us with 100% saying they want to explore, they are keen, and it's application. So thank you, everyone, and big hands up to Vaughan, the Baron of BIM, and Dylan today. Thank you very much indeed. I wish we could have another 3 hours to talk. Final word from you, Dylan, before we conclude with Vaughan. So final word from you, Dylan, just quickly, why we need to do what we're doing today.
Yeah, I mean, we've applied this now in ongoing case studies, be it on small, medium-sized, and large projects, and we seeing the benefits throughout. I think what's very key, and what we've been harboring on to many of the clients is projects don't have a finality. There is a true need for better asset management in Mauritius. And by creating this digital twin, this allows the industry to take whatever's being delivered and allow that continuation to be exemplary, because it's not at the moment. I think we fall very short, and it being a difficult profession, facilities management, it's quite key. And so to utilize these methods and processes, it's a game changer.
Absolutely. And final word, Vaughan, from yourself before we conclude this amazing and inspiring webinar.
Yeah, I think I'm going to end up by saying, it's important that each of your listeners, you find your own Mr. Miyagi in this industry. That Mr. Miyagi made, the good old the Karate Kid, wax on, wax off. But remember, BIM training, no matter who you do it with, is going to vary from instructor to instructor. Maybe software training or actually BIM leadership training. You must remember, it's like a karate instructor. From the minute you enter that karate dojo, the student must put themselves in a different or the right mindset. You must be able to train your body and your mind as well as understand your industry. And you need to be prepared to leave your previous traditional project processes behind and enter with an open mind, ready to absorb and be prepared to fully embrace this new way of working. We're moving forward, so you have to stay with us. And those principles must apply. You need to ask yourself the question, how do I sell the benefits of BIM to my client, to the team? I need to understand the principles of a BIM execution plan. Why is it going to help the governing team? Understand the software applications and the file formats. And I can't reiterate more on file formats. There's where we try to integrate the codes. Understand those basic principles of connected BIM, where we talk about common data environments. And finally, most important of all, understand the delivery of structured standards. ISO 19650, great guideline as far as I'm concerned. Yes, there's classification systems, there's reports, there's clients' requirements. You need to make a calculated decision what's going to work for you best, not what is determined by another country when you don't live in that country. So just remember that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vaughan. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Please send me your feedback as well as your name for the certificate attendance. Please email me at anil@cbtalk.com. And finally, if your little one is struggling to sleep, mention the Baron of BIM. He or she will definitely go to sleep ASAP. On this note, thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure having all of you. Until next time. And again, once again, honored and privileged to have both of you. This is my 83rd webinar number 83. And I'm so touched and humble to have both of you to really kickstart our industry again. Thank you very much indeed. Take care and have a great one. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks,
bye.
Bye.